Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. Well, maybe I should pronounce my name like it's in Icelandic. It's very tough to do it for foreigners. I've not yet met a person outside Iceland has been able to pronounce it, although there have been many honest attempts and some quite good. It is Hjörtur Guðmundsson in Icelandic. But anyway, thank you for this great opportunity to be here today and talk about Iceland, my home country, and the current situation there regarding the European Union and our experience of being outside the European Union. Like Barry mentioned, there is a rather left-wing government in Iceland. I wouldn't call them communists, but I can assure you that democracy is in very good shape in Iceland, although we are outside the EU. It's a bit tough to be here today and give a speech after these two great speakers, but I'm going to do my best. As you know, Iceland is not a member of the European Union. It never has been, and I'm absolutely convinced it never will be. As Barry mentioned, the Icelandic economy crashed in 2008 at the wake of the international economic crisis. And this event triggered a number of things, and one of those things was delivering an application to join the European Union. For the first time, Norway has done it 2 times and rejected it twice in a referendum, and the Swiss still have their application since 20 years ago. They have it in some shelf in Brussels or something, in some ice, but it's probably doesn't exist anymore. I mean, if it would apply, they would probably have to start from the beginning anyway. But since the crisis, as mentioned, unemployment has decreased significantly, and the economy is growing again. The Icelandic state's credit default swap has furthermore decreased fast since the crash, and the country has returned to the international bond markets, while countries such as Portugal and Ireland remain locked out. The recovery of the Icelandic economy is mainly the result of one thing: the fact that Iceland is a sovereign country and it has its own national currency, which has helped the economy to become competitive again, contributing to a boom in the export and tourist sectors. We have had extremely good years in the tourist sectors since the crash, because Iceland has suddenly become a cheap country again. Before the crash, the value of our currency was so high that it was rather difficult for many people to come there, but there are lots of people that are coming to Iceland who have been dreaming of coming there as tourists for a number of years, but now suddenly it has become possible. So I could imagine if Greece would go out of the Eurozone, they would probably experience the same thing. But even though the EU application was delivered in 2009, there has never been necessary political and public support in Iceland for joining the bloc, which is of course why Iceland has never before had sent an application to join. The thing is that when the crisis hit, there was a brief period of maybe 2 months, 3 months, when the port for joining the EU went up. But just 3 months after the crisis, it went down again. It was just seemed to be a sudden, temporary, people were just unsure of the future and so on, and they saw the EU for a brief moment as a safe port. But then, just 3 months after, they realized that it was not. And but even when the application was delivered, the necessary backing did therefore not exist. And there was actually only one reason why the application was delivered. It was only for political reasons, because the party in Iceland, most of the left, wanted to stay in government with the Social Democrats, which are the only political party in Iceland wants to join the EU. And they decided to use this issue to stay in government, to allow the Social Democrats to send in an application, even though the party furthest to the left is, according to the manifesto, against joining the EU.
Yeah.
So this was just a political horse trading. It had nothing to do with political support in the country or changes in that or public support. So but since the application was delivered, the opposition to join the EU has increased significantly. And in July this summer, there will have been 3 years, straight years, vast majority against joining the EU. Every single poll which has been produced in Iceland, no matter who has produced it, every single poll, for 3 straight years. Actually, the Norwegians have done even better, because in every single poll produced in Norway since 2005, there has been a vast majority against joining the EU. So ever since before the Lisbon Treaty, the Constitution was rejected. So I think, according to the latest poll in Norway, I think it's 75% against joining the EU. And then we are talking about the no's, the yes, and also those who are uncertain. I think it's about 12 or 13% of the Norwegian people want to join the EU. In Iceland, it's about, well, if there would be, according to the polls, it would be a referendum today, it would be around 2/3 of the people would say no, at least. So, and this has been in a number of polls. So this is not a coincidence. This is the fact. This is how it is. But somehow the people in Brussels, they only look at the polls that have been, because there have been polls asking if do you want to join the EU, and then there have been polls, do you want to carry on with the application? And since it depends on how you phrase the question about whether to go on with this application, because there have been some criticism of some of the polls in Iceland, which have shown a majority for carrying on the application. And Brussels points to those polls, but then we have also probably more reliable polls saying the majority does not want to carry on with the application. But they ignore that. Perhaps it doesn't suit them. But there's actually more support for carrying on with the application, somewhat more than for joining the EU. But that's probably because there is a number of people in Iceland who think that if there will be a referendum, then this issue can be settled for, just a closure. But you can just look at Norway. They have twice rejected it, but the issue has not been closed. So, but it's only because of the opposition in the country that there hasn't been a new referendum since '94, since they rejected it the last time. But it's maybe not surprised that the majority of Icelanders also don't want to adopt the euro, the vast majority, one way or another, because there has been a certain debate in Iceland, as you may have heard, of adopting perhaps another currency. And there was in the news some reports that Iceland was considering adopting the Canadian dollar. But that's not that serious debate. That's just one of the ideas floating. But and one of the reasons of that is that there has been a certain, at least in my opinion, very justifiable, not very honest criticism of our national currency. Because after the crash, those who want to join the EU, especially, and people who have, also people who, by some reason, want another currency, have pointed to the national currency and said that's why everything crashed, because of the currency. It has been quite easy to point the finger at the currency, and I think it's absolutely not justifiable. But I think that people are realizing in Iceland how much the independent currency has really helped us. after the crash to restore the economy. And so, because it's absolutely the reason for why we are recovering this fast. It's because we can control our currency ourselves. It reflects our economy, and it has helped us to boost the export and the tourist sectors, which has done extremely well, good for us. But anyway, fresh poll just I think it was a couple of weeks back, showed that also the vast majority of the business community in Iceland now is opposed to joining the EU. And also the majority of the Federation of Icelandic Industries, which has for a long time been actually the backbone of the pro-EU movement in Iceland in the business community. So the opposition to joining the EU has been increasing very fast in Iceland. And it was enough before. So, but so it's in light of all this, it doesn't come as a surprise that the representatives who come to Iceland since the application was delivered have reportedly in their conversations with Icelandic politicians, private conversations, or just when talking to them, they have asked, why did you send that application? Why are you maintaining this? And there have even been suggestions that, openly, that we should put this application on ice and just, decide if we want to join the EU or not. Because there is no interest in the country for doing this. So, but there has actually been also reports from Brussels, from the EU Parliament and other places, with serious worries about the domestic opposition in the country. And both among the public and also in the Parliament and in the government, because the government is split on the issue. There has been infighting in the government. There has been, the left-wing movement has lost 50% of the votes it got in the elections in 2009. And probably, mostly because of this, at least large part of it is because they decided to allow this application, despite the fact that their manifesto said they were against joining the EU. And the government itself, it has, I think the support for the government now is about 30% or something like that. And of course that's also because the people are not satisfied with how they have handled the crisis, because although we have been recovering, then people don't really think that it's the government to thank for. Many people in Iceland think that the government has actually done the opposite. They have been making things worse. But nevertheless, we have still been recovering, even though we have government which is reportedly not doing very well. So you can imagine if we would have a good government. But this just shows how important it is to have, to control your economy yourself, to have your own currency which reflects your economy. And if we would have the euro, I don't want to think about that. But when this application was delivered, there was this claim that this could be very speedy because we are members of the EEA, the European Economic Area. You probably recognize what that is. They talked about a year, maybe 2 years, but now I think we haven't. Don't think the half of the process is over, of the EU accession process. And they will definitely not finish this before the next general elections will be, which will be in the spring of next year. And after that elections, we will probably have a government in Iceland which is absolutely against joining the EU. So it's very likely that there may possibly never be a referendum on this, because the application will simply be shelved or just withdrawn, because there was never really a reason to send this application. It was just, well, you could say that the parties that are forming the government today were kind of using the EU to at least, the left-wing movement, which is the party to the furthest to the left, was, you could say that they were using this issue just to stay in government. but there was never enough support to join the EU to accent this application. I was going to say also a few words about the EEA, our experience of the EEA, European Economic Area, which we became members of in 1994. You probably recognize this. It's actually, it involves all the member states of the EU, plus Iceland, Norway, and Liechtenstein. The Swiss, the fourth EFTA state, it's an agreement. The EEA agreement is an agreement between EFTA and the EU. And the fourth EFTA state, Swiss, have rejected membership in a referendum. So they went their own way and made a number of bilateral agreements with the EU. The EEA agreement grants the three EFTA countries access to the EU in the market, but instead they have to adopt a certain part of the EU legislation, which concerns the single market. On the other hand, they don't have to participate in things like the common fisheries policy, the common agriculture policy. They have their own customs and trade policy, control their immigration issues themselves, full authority over their police matters, and so on and so forth. It's only a limited, it only reaches to a limited area. I might add that EFTA was actually a British initiative. You probably know this. It was founded in 1960 at the initiative of Britain, and it was thought of as an alternative to the European Economic Community, the predecessor of the EU. But then the British government somehow decided to leave this genuine free trade area and join a rather old-fashioned customs union, to say the least. I don't know why, but being a member of the EFTA has without doubt proved highly beneficial for Iceland. The biggest advantage has been being able to conclude free trade agreements in cooperation with other EFTA countries or alone if considered more suitable. For example, if some interest of another EFTA country would turn out to be an obstacle for a joint approach. It also has happened that one EFTA state has, for example, started negotiations with some other country, and then the others have joined in. Because the greatest thing about EFTA, to my opinion, the greatest benefit is that you don't sacrifice your independent trade policy. And you can, like for example, now you can debate if that's a good move, but Iceland is, for example, in a independent negotiation with China on free trade. And we can do this because we have an independent trade policy. And you can imagine if Britain had been outside, you would probably possibly have a free trade agreement to India or Canada or whatever you would prefer, would like to try. But of course you don't have the right to do that because the EU has the power to do so. But today the EFTA countries have 33 free trade agreements around the world, including countries such as Canada, Mexico, Egypt, South Africa, Chile, Ukraine, South Korea, Hong Kong, and Jordan. They also have free trade relations in various preparation stages with many countries, I think it's about 20 or something like that, such as India, Russia, and Panama. Or as it says on the EFTA website, its network with free trade agreements secures economic operators preferential access to markets currently of around 440 million consumers outside the European Union. So it's a huge market. It's growing fast because this EFTA has been increasing this. It has been stepping up this negotiations with other countries. And if you look at the EFTA website, you can see a map of the world, and with different colors for different stages of free trade relations. And it's almost the whole map is covered. And maybe someday it will be. The whole of the map will be covered. But the difference between members of the EEA and the EU is of course tremendous, but the main difference could be summed up in four things. First, as I previously mentioned, the EEA only covers a very limited area. As a result, the EU legislation which Iceland, Norway, and Liechtenstein need to adopt as a result of the membership is only a token amount of the total EU legislation. According to a study carried out by the EFTA office in Brussels and published in 2005, only 6.5% of the EU regulations, directives, and decisions had by then been taken into the EEA agreement since it was launched in 1984. And, well, if you ask me, it's 6.5% too much, but that's another story. I understand the total EU legislation is about 100,000 pieces of legislation. In comparison, there is a total about 5,000 laws and regulations in force in Iceland today. Around 1,000 laws and 4,000 regulations, including those coming from the EU. So you can, of course, a legislation and legislation is not the same. It can be of different importance, but nevertheless, this tells a certain story. It's only a token amount of the legislation. And secondly, the EU legislation does not automatically become active in EFTA EEA states once accepted in the EU institutions. No legislation from the EU becomes enforceable before it has gone through the domestic institutions, either the relevant parliament or government ministry. So it's not like in the EU that some regulation passed in some EU institution, it becomes enforceable like in Britain. It has to be first adopted into Icelandic law, for example, or an Icelandic regulation. Third, the EFTA EEA countries have, according to the EEA agreement, the right to veto a legal act from the EU if they believe that it's going against their interests. And finally, Norway, Iceland, and Liechtenstein can unilaterally leave the European Economic Area if they, by some reason, believe membership does not suit their interests anymore. But I might mention that on the negative side, as a member of the EEA, Iceland has had to adopt some regulations which have not suited circumstances in Iceland or even its interests, which is understandable because this legislation is not really, it's not crafted for Iceland. It's not produced for Iceland, for circumstances there. But Iceland has, on the other hand, the possibility as the other EFTA EEA states to have influence on the proceedings up to when a legislation in the EU is adopted. So they can influence it.